during those times, one's nerves are always on edge, and very quickly everybody spilled out of their hammocks and hurried on the upper deck. I was living with my family, working 5 days a week, 5.5 days a week in a shop, and the little old man would not close it till there was not another human being around. It was very dull, and I didn't seem to be getting anywhere. Each day was the same. Then I saw an advert for entry into the supply branch or the writer branch of the Royal Navy. There would be an examination, and one had to go and get a doctor's certificate first, and then report to Portsmouth and take a written examination, which I did and passed. And so 6 weeks later, roughly, I joined the Royal Navy. And I was glad to get into the Navy and get away. When I went back at the weekends in my new uniform, I felt I was somebody. The Westminster, believe it or not, was built in 1918. They're quite old. They were relics of the time when the fleet was enormous, and there were 52 of the WW destroyers built. Westminster was one of the 52 which survived. You must understand, everything was a bit of a muddle and everything was a bit of a rush. And we were hurriedly stored, and we went up the channel and we started our duties as an escort for the Merchant Navy. We were all taken off our convoy duties. I think they must have thought they can manage from now on. We were taken from there, and certainly the destroyers. I can only speak what happened in the area I was in. We formed a flotilla under Louis Mountbatten, and we went across to the continent, and it was our job to bombard the enemy coastline, ships, people, army people, anything we could to slow down the German advance down through Europe. My place during any such thing was, unfortunately, down below in the magazine. That was my working place in what we called action stations. It was in the bows of the ship. It was down 2 decks. One went down through a round hole, just about sufficient room to get down a straight metal rung ladder to the magazine. When you got in the magazine, you looked around, and they were, now remember, I'm not a gunnery man, but they were 4.7 shells. And our job was, when the gun up top wanted replacement shells, we unclipped these. They were all in racks around us. And we unclipped them and we lifted them onto a slide which took them up to the guns. Well, you can imagine the sides of the ship of a destroyer of the W class were quite thin, and there was quite a bit of bombing and noise going on, and the ship would be quivering, and you were down there with all these shells around us, and there was just the leading cook and me down there. And he said to me, Reg, one consolation, if anything hits here, we'll go higher than anybody else. We came back to Dover, we bombed up, we got replacement shells, filled the magazines up, and we turned across to go back to the continent, to roughly the French coast. We were doing about 25 knots, so a pretty fast little. And I was on the watchkeeper's mess deck, sleeping in my hammock down below. Somewhere about midnight, there was a sudden terrific wrenching noise, and the engine stopped. You know, during those times, one's nerves are always on edge, and very quickly everybody spilled out of their hammocks, and almost immediately the hatch was opened, and the gunner's mate, who was a petty officer, was up there, and he was saying, come on, get out of there while you can. We didn't know whether it was a bomb, a mine, a submarine, what it was. The whole crew had to assemble on the upper deck. We'd stopped. We were shipping water down below, and the ship was settling. We weren't sure whether we were going to completely sink or not. We were told to sit on the centre line and not move around. We settled at about water level. The water was just about level with the deck, and she was obviously settled at that. They had radioed for help, and there was a tug coming out from Dunkirk. Unfortunately, while we were all sat there, a French chasseur, which was a small French vessel, thought we were a German submarine, and they started shelling us. I don't know what size the shells were, but every 1 in 4 or 5 were lit up. These shells were coming over, and we were terrified then till somebody got the message to the French ship of what we were. On the next morning, and remember, during the war, one lived a lot on rumour, an awful lot of rumour, more than actual facts were not often broadcast. And so in Portsmouth, the general knowledge was that the Westminster had sunk. And a petty officer who was with his wife lodging with my mother and father, he was working in barracks, and he saw this crew arrive, which would have been all of our crew bar the dozen of us left behind. And he went home and told my mother that he was very sorry, but he'd seen the survivors from the Westminster, and Reg wasn't there. And he assumed that I might well be missing. When I did arrive, which was about 7-8 days later, I was bearded and dirty and hungry and fed up and everything. I rang the door and banged the door, And Mum came to the door and opened it, and she looked at me and she said, yes? I said, Mum, and her tears flooded.